since last year to really fight for having the framing of human rights recognized both in the preamble of that new action plan and in one of the activities. So I guess one of the takes towards COP28 will be to see one of the activities, concretely it's for the Secretariat to do, but it's a report to see how states, what good practices are there relating to these human rights, to public participation, right to access information, and right to education in the context of climate change. So I think it might be a small step, but still it's a significant step to also be able to bring coherence. And what we hope with the human rights, I would say, approach is to also step by step be able to bring the issue of environmental human rights defenders being in the front line they are fighting for access to participation, real information, and so that they can take action. So that's one thing. Then maybe the second point on human rights-based approach that we're seeing, also in terms of coherence, we've been advocating for, and that's actually a call that faith leaders, I don't know if you've heard, but this year the UN General Assembly adopted and recognized at the universal level the right to a clean, healthy and sustainable environment. So that was like a major breakthrough after decades of advocacy, and faith leaders were very powerful. They actually endorsed that call and they contributed very powerfully for this win. So what we're trying is to also make sure that the COP process is not like outside of everything and that there is really coherence. So right now we're pushing very hard for the right to a healthy environment to be in the cover decision. It was in the last draft until yesterday and it got removed in the draft of this morning. So we really are pushing strongly that it can be brought back as also an expression of value, of a strong value of what should be at the center. And it's the right of everyone to a clean, healthy and sustainable environment. And so the last point I wanted to share in terms of the way we've engaged as well is that linking this issue of participation to have various voices represented and also touching on the issue of resilience, we've supported a side event. We were told it was the first one, but of young people of faith taking action for climate change, and it was really uplifting. The comments were and the feedbacks were really, really full of hope and to have these voices. So the event was designed by youth, for youth, with youth. Everybody were invited, but I think it was for young people of faith. And I think like what was really fantastic, and I think it's another way forward towards COP28, is to see how this network that is I would say, organically creating solidarity will evolve and really will try to bring this spirit of resilience throughout. And so I guess I would say now that's the last point, but it's towards COP28. I think my take would be that we really need to continue as faith leaders to emphasize on the coherence as well. So everything that you have called for, so we align in the sense of really the coherence of the calls, the coherence of then taking the action at national level, and then the coherence of how we do take action within our own faith movements at national and local level. Thank you very much.
Thank you all for your reflections, and I think it was very important, like everyone highlighted and kind of uplifted that kind of the value-based approach from not only a personal level but bringing it to the international level, and I think that's something that will actually make us be able to move forward in these discussions. And also the community engagement as well from different faith organizations and how we are reflecting back upon our own organizations and what we can do to help in this climate emergency. So do we have any questions that people would like to ask?
Thank you so much. Hi guys, thanks so much for the lovely panel. I'm really loving these reflections on how different faith-based groups are really contributing into this space and thinking about how we move forward. I've been really sitting on this question of how oftentimes we think a lot about critiquing the bad, but one beautiful thing about faith-based organizations and this lovely panel that we have here is that we're actively on the ground also modeling the better. Right, and so where we do see that there is a lot of space to critique the shortfalls and shortcomings of these spaces, I love that you guys are all gathered here to really showcase how we can really move forward, and it's through this values-based framework. And oftentimes we may run into this question of like values can be a little bit abstract. So I'd love to hold a question for you all and just hold space to reflect with us. How are your respective organizations really modeling these values on the ground with communities that you're working with and championing the way forward, right? Because we know that faiths are already on the front lines taking these actions. Would love to hear some stories, examples of how we, through really internalizing and embodying these values in our systems, processes, and how we interact with our communities, are able to really bring forth that sense of climate resilience and take climate action.
What a lovely question. Thank you. It's one of the learnings as we brought a dozen church members with us to this COP, either online or in person, is realizing that this is work for all of us, that people are equipped to be active members in this global community. And even things that sound complicated, like loss and damage and finance scale up, are for us. When we think about what we do in our own hometowns, our own churches in our case, we give money to resilience, to repair, for disaster relief. So these things are not outside of our daily life and practices, and asking people of faith to remember what the ethics brought us here also helps us understand that we are part of this work and we can hold people accountable.
And if I can just jump in, considering that the theme of this COP is Together for Implementation, it is our communities of faith that are implementing what it is that we are asking for our governments to support. I think we are some of the best examples globally, and as we come together for implementation, continuing to tell those stories. In my organization with Interfaith Power and Light, it truly is a play on the concept of the power and light within us and our relationship to power and light. And a practical implementation example is how we power our houses of worship globally. And so every single minute that we turn on that light switch to light up our sanctuaries and go into our most sacred spaces, we have to recognize what that means, what the source of that generation is. And as we switch to clean, efficient, renewable energy, so too can the world. And we are that beacon of light. So together for implementation, let's continue to tell these stories globally and hold our governments accountable.
Great, thank you very much. Do we have any other questions?
Hi, Linnea Main from the Episcopal Church. I was wondering if you might share with us what are the deepest areas of resistance to this work within your communities? And what is your strategy for moving that forward, especially as we think of implementation? And I'm not talking necessarily governments, but actually within our own faith communities. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that question. So I think one of the examples I would like to share is resistance comes when we try to see like one is better than the other, or like one community is doing more than the other. But I think from the Baha'i community experience, all these efforts are geared towards uniting us and seeing us each other as a brother and sister who are working towards a common good. So there is no one who is special than the other. If there is a crisis, say, in Pakistan or in Kenya or in the Gambia, we're all facing it. And there is, we create these dichotomies because we want to try to prove a point. But the ultimate goal is that we all share this beautiful blue planet, and we have to take care of it from the villages to the cities to, from one continent to another continent. and really trying to make the effort of seeing the good and putting the energy to what that unites us more than what that divides us. And I can share really, like, in the Baha'i community across the world, there is some programs that are called the Junior Youth Program, where the kids are sharing these activities with their peers from diverse faiths, from diverse, class, or they don't see each other like, oh, you come from a well-to-do family, or, they look at each other as brothers and sisters, and they go out for a cleanup, they share the efforts, and they do things that really brings about the unity. And especially when we educate the young ones to grow in that setup of seeing each other as one, it really brings a lot of realization of why we have to work together, even on different levels. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I add something to? So thank you very much. I would say for I think two things. One is that something that I actually experienced myself too. So I'm sure pretty many people experience it too. But the moments of like true despair as to where we're going, and even if I'm in that fight and I'm really practicing my own faith. I do have a moment where I feel completely disempowered. So I think that is a real issue of I would say like a challenge or resistance. And to that, I think we respond like everything that has been said by really reaching out to others, creating solidarity and mutual encouragement and support. And then for me, yeah, I guess to really encourage others to go back to their prime point, in spiritual prime point, so that they can really find the inner motivation. And then maybe the second thing that I see as a challenge is how to best move some structures, institutions, investments, and to do that in a way where people feel ownership within the national, international. So I wouldn't say I have an answer for that, but I guess dialogue, and pushing for dialogue. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And that's exactly the entry point of my question. We're in communities that suffer from so much hopelessness and despair, and the competing interests of low wealth, white supremacy, not enough, and lack. How do you push in? How do you enter into that conversation with congregations with so many other things swirling that may be deemed, and not necessarily so, more important? Where's that entry point for you?
Well, very shortly, I have to say that the illusion of scarcity is a thing that erodes hope. And although folks would like to split people of faith and goodwill by saying that we can't have both loss and damage and at mitigation, or you can't have investment at home and abroad, I think true people of faith understand that hope is something that goes beyond, and that being divided into thinking that there are competing interests always, it's just a way to depower people. And so this experience of being in community, of talking together, working together, helps us realize that there is more out there. There is always more resources, but also more hope. And so we have to keep holding that accountable and holding ourselves up to do our work in our ethics.
Okay, thank you very much. That will be all for today. So thank you very much for your questions. So lastly, I want to say, as interfaith communities, creating that space to come together in unity and moving forward to the next COP. So thank you very much, everybody, for joining us today. Thank you.
So that's where we are right now. Mr. Shukri indicated this much, that he will now start, and it is actually taking place right now, meeting groups to listen to them, each group at a time, to make sure we understand exactly where the concerns of various groups are. So it's not on a topic, it's across the board most of the time. And this is what is happening right now, and will continue to go on until we bring this to what we hope to be the good conclusion we're looking forward to. That is regarding the main negotiation streams that have been taking place all along. On the other hand, the cover decisions, which you may have, know about and what they do, they provide an overview. They are used by presidencies to fill in the areas that don't necessarily have proper agenda items under consideration, but they also do touch on some of the areas under consideration without encroaching on the party-driven, country-owned parts, but giving more general remarks on it, and that's the practice which we followed. What did we do and why did we do it? We took it in a gradual, progressive sort of manner. The first one was just to have an open meeting where people expressed what they would like to see in general, or specific if they so wished at that time, in those cover decisions. The next phase was to provide them with elements in the form of bullets under general headings. Let's say mitigation, 10 bullets, 9 bullets, whatever. Everyone would say, okay, I like these, but I want some other ones, or these are too many, whatever transpired. And then the next phase was to provide them with text, but a lot of text, because we had heard very, very, very much from parties. They were very generous with their contributions. So the document, after we tried to reduce it and limit it, was 51 pages. And we made it clear to everyone, and despite that, a lot of people in the media got it really wrong. They assumed that this was a text produced by the presidency. That was abundantly clear to everyone in the rooms. This was not a presidency-driven document. Rather, it was, I don't want to use the word compilation because it wasn't a complete compilation, but selectively chosen because there were redundancies and repetitions, but it was intended to show everyone what everyone else was saying. We succeeded only in bringing it down to 20-some pages, and everyone in the room, most people in the room, and for those who asked, we responded to them with what I'm explaining right now. This was not a presidency position. It had incredibly diverse and divergent views, so it couldn't be the product of any single author. It would just seem out of the ordinary to have that many divergent issues. So it spoke for itself, and we clarified it at least 5-7 times throughout the day, yet a lot of the coverage referred to it as the presidency document. It never was that, and most people were aware of that. Next was the product that we held another meeting when we got feedback over the 20-page document, and then we spent overnight between yesterday and today. Thanks very much to the Secretariat. They were in the rooms next to us to take the products that we gave to them, which was again more streamlined, more concise document that brought the 20-some pages down maybe 8 or 9 pages, and that is our product. So the first COP27 presidency document was the one that was released, I think, first iteration was 330, and then there was a correction in some paragraphs that got lost in the sending from us to the Secretariat. So I think the most recent one was 9 a.m. document. That, again, I'll stress, is the presidency document. We are very well aware that, because they made us know how they felt, that not everyone was completely happy with that product. And that is to be expected because, again, as I've repeatedly said, we're dealing with 190 something parties who don't see the same issues from the same perspective. So at the end of the day, this is normal. I don't think we have much to worry about. I hope I'm not wrong. We'll discover exactly how people feel in exactly 17 minutes when I open today's HODS meeting to receive feedback from people on the document. We fully expect people to ask things that they were dear to them and were in the 20-page document to come back, and others will object to language that is there, and yet others will ask to drop things that are there. That is perfectly normal, and that was part of the game plan moving forward, that we start broad and try to narrow things down until people feel comfortable. And I stress it in the beginning and at the conclusion of every HODS that I invite heads of delegation to attend. No one is supposed to be completely comfortable. If anyone is 100% happy and content, that means there's groups on the other side that are going to be quite disturbed. So people need to understand that it is never going to be accommodating your national perspective or this group's perspective 100%. So this is where we are right now. Just to recap where we are at this moment. On the cover decisions, we will have this round. I would be surprised if this was sufficient and we only had very few issues outstanding. I would expect that we might have to produce another iteration of it in light of what we hear today. People let you know what is an extreme red line for them, and then we take that back and try to fine-tune things to make everyone comfortable. The objective is to be able, at conclusion plenary, to adopt it without incident. It rarely happens without incident, but that's of course the objective. Regarding the negotiating streams, as I indicated, everything now is with the presidency, and Minister Shukri, as I indicated, is holding meetings as we speak with various groups. Time doesn't allow to have a round with everyone on each one of the issues, so it's probably, I'm speculating now, it's probably going to be to listen to them on the main issues across the board, but I can't confirm that. It depends on what happens in the rooms, of course. The objective of that is to allay concerns, accommodate requests to the extent possible in such a large collective consensus-based process. So that's where we are right now, and I do have another 10 minutes, so thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. We don't have interpretation today, so please only questions in English. I start here in the first row.
Thank you for the briefing, it's very helpful. John Ainger, Bloomberg News. Countries have called for a number of strengthened language measures in the cover text, yet they've not appeared in either the compilation or the cover text overnight. Things like peaking emissions by 2025, phasing down fossil fuels, a roadmap for phasing down coal. Why has that not been included, and will you include it now, seeing as it could be the key to unlock talks on loss and damage? Thank you.
You made the linkage, I didn't, that last sentence. I'll just be very specific to the first part of your question. Ambition can be interpreted by people in different manners. The one that you mentioned right now is reflected, has been reflected to us, and we'll hear it again, I trust, in the meeting room in a few minutes. Others think it is too forward moving on some issues, and that it is very poor and lacking when it comes to the support side. Yet others say that the adaptation section doesn't meet their expectations. So it depends who you're talking to, and we're talking to everyone, and they do not hesitate to come to us. And Mr. Shukri says it every time. My door specifically is open 24 hours, and he's practically in the building for 20 hours a day. So when people come to us with their thoughts, they reflect a certain perspective. So I would be very reluctant to attribute any perspective to the entirety, or else we wouldn't have a problem. We just accommodate and do what they want. So I've heard that, I've heard other things, so I just want to set it clear to everyone. These are 197 countries with very, very different economic levels, aspirations, capacities to move forward, and expectations when it comes to support in particular. So we heard the young lady from Ghana, I hope you all heard her. Very, very articulate, but also very to the point, and hitting really a lot of important notes that I'm glad that the world got to hear. So that's where it is, different views around here.
The lady here in the first row.
Thank you, Victoria Seabrook from Sky News. The 20-page list of bullet points, if that wasn't produced by the presidency, then who did produce it? And there's been a lot of praise about the skill and experience of Egypt's negotiators, and therefore surprised that the first draft only appeared today. Why did it only come on Friday? Thank you.
I thought I answered in a too long version the first part of your question, but I'll say it again. As I indicated, and on our text, it had attributions. So it said this came from this group, this came from this party. So you're asking who produced it. We collated it. We brought it together, and it was 50-some pages, not 20, but the one that we tried to reduce because there were repetitions. So it was a collection of the most prominent things we don't count heads, but we try to identify issues that are important to people. So that's where the product comes. The short answer to your question, it is a product that was produced over 2 rounds of listening to people, first without a piece of paper, second with the elements, and that is that product. So that's the answer. I wouldn't mention anything about skills. That's for others to determine based on whatever success we may have in the past or here. But we think we're following a very, very clear game plan, as I indicated, at least in this regard, which is where we have a little bit more influence on the product. And as I described, we started very broad, and gradually we're getting to the narrower part. Hopefully time will fit and work, that we will have the product that people can all be comfortable with along the lines I just described. No one will be completely satisfied. So that's where we hope to utilize, I don't call them skills, I say the tools in our toolbox, because it's not just us. We play a role, but we have multiple people from various delegations. We have good contacts with everyone, and I mean every group, and we've known them for years, and we utilize those contacts to have. We had a meeting yesterday at 3 a.m. in the morning with some delegations, so they're willing to come to us. We go to them over a cup of coffee, and we try to understand where they're coming from and come up with balanced outcomes. So it is a very complex, broad process, and we're utilizing everything at our disposal to make it move forward. Yeah.
The lady here in the first row.
Sophie Mukwena from the South African Broadcasting Corporation. I just want to find out, the issue of loss and damages was always going to be a thorny one. Fortunately, it's on the agenda, but financing, are you making headways in all these sticky points in terms of financing?
I assume you mean the funding for loss and damage or the finance agenda by and large? Yeah. I got you, yeah. It was, of course, coming out of Glasgow, a reason for a lot of frustration for many countries who are on the front lines of the climate emergency. So we were aware of that. Anyone following would have been aware. So we allocated a lot of the resources and time and effort between Glasgow. It didn't start here, but of course intensified with the appointment a few months before COP of Jennifer Morgan and Maisa Rojas from Chile and Germany. To shepherd the process, and they did that to the best of their ability. It is not an easy issue. It is quite complicated, and I'm sure many of you are aware of the complexities surrounding that issue. They did their best, and then now we step in. We've taken the most recent text, which has 3 options at least on paper to see what we can do with it, and that's again part of the conversation Minister Shukri will be having, perhaps started and will continue to have. We have high hopes. We were tasked to put every effort, but also to get it on the agenda. We need to remember where we were on November 5th. Many people were highly skeptical that this could even be on the agenda. And it was not easy. It was very close, and we had meetings to finalize the agenda on the morning of the 6th, before the opening, literally a few minutes. So it wasn't a done deal at all. So we're happy we could have brought that forward, but we always knew that it wasn't just about having a space and a discussion. It had to be meaningful, but then it gets complicated. Some people wanted to be over the mandate's duration that came in the agenda. Others want to get it done fast. The modalities and the system and the word facility can mean many different things. There's a direct, simple notion of this big pot where people put money and then you have something, and then there are a variety of other options, and this is all in the hands of parties. They come from different perspectives. So we're hoping for the best, and we'll continue to work, hopefully, for that outcome. But as we always say, it's in the hands of the parties. They have to realize the importance and move forward.
The lady here on the side.
Jayashree from Hindustan Times. I wanted to know, EU has put forward a proposal on the loss and damage issue, and I've heard from developing countries some of them are opposed to this proposal. Do you see flexibility among these parties to come at a landing zone, and how would the presidency resolve these differences over the next 24 hours?
I think my answer will be quite similar to the previous question in the sense that we're of course aware of it. I've heard it read out to me. I haven't seen it on a piece of paper to actually, look at the small fine print there. And it's just an option now. I mean, and there was a meeting earlier when the two ministers came to report to Minister Shukri. They indicated to us who supported what, so we're at least aware of that, and that helps us. The two ministers are in the background as we start. They offered, and Minister Shukri, of course, welcomed, to continuously fall back on their counsel, but at the end of the day, he will take it forward, bearing in mind, of course, what was announced by the EU. But again, just like every one of the other existing options, there were supporters, and there were people who were not comfortable with it. So just, I don't have much to add there. It is all on the table, and even more variations or combinations of the options might emerge as we move. The main idea is to ensure meaningful funding to people who need it with regard to loss and damage. That is the objective that everyone shares. How to get there gets a little bit more complicated, but we'll do our best.
Thank you. We have to close here. One more? Okay, one more question. Yeah, the lady here on the right side.
Thank you. I was worried you'd never look this way. Group of 77 yesterday indicated at one of the panels that there are voices within the group calling for them to simply walk out. Is that something that you're worried about at this point, that that actually might happen, that we may not get a final decision? And then question that every single one of my colleagues is asking, do you know from the top of your head when was the last time COP finished on Friday? Thank you.
Could you please identify yourself?
Ivana Kutasva from CNN, sorry.
Okay. I'd have to refer you, of course, to the G77 chair, Minister Nabil Munir. He knows the exact details of their position. The last I heard is that the G77 is holding on to their coherent collective position, but that's just a short sentence he shared with me, and he can better answer that. Coincidentally, you're asking a question that I have an answer to, which is regarding, I have a chart, someone showed it to me, I wish I could bring it and share it next time. I think in the history of COPs, it happened twice. And then we had the listing of Saturdays and I think 3 Sundays. So, and I've been to some of those Sundays as well. So it's not a testament for or against a COP presidency. It really is a function of how things proceed. As I said before, some things seem sailing smoothly and then they stall, and the reverse, you get a breakthrough. So it is a very broad and complex process with many sovereign states that doesn't have a voting culture or mechanism on substantive issues. So it's subject to so many crosswinds that might affect how things transpire. What matters really is to have meaningful outcomes. I take Monday if I was guaranteed, a meaningful outcome. But it is what it is. You deal with it, and then sometimes you get a late break and you finish early on a Friday. So we'll see how it goes. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ambassador, and we are trying to get you the chart that Ambassador Abul Magd was mentioning. So thank you for today, and please watch out for the next press conference.
من 7000 سنة المصري كان مشغول بفكرة الخلود، فكرة غريبة لكنها خلته يخلق طرق جديدة لتحقيقها. فكر ازاي يستغل كل الموارد اللي حواليه وفي نفس الوقت يحافظ عليها. موارد
مبني على مش مبني على الكربون. شكرا أحمد. بدي أخذ مداخلة من حضرتك. سؤال تفضلي، ولو سمحتوا كم سؤال بعد في إذا الأسئلة المتبقية فينا ناخذ بس سؤال أو سؤالين بعد ونجاوب عليهم بعدين. تفضلي.
مرحبا جميعا، اسمي نورهان غانمي، ممثلة عن Youth for Climate Tunisia. I have an intervention, not a question. بلادي وإن جارت علي عزيزة، مقولة معززة علمت أبناء شعوبنا تجرع كؤوس الذل والرضوخ للظلم، وبلداننا أصبحت تجور علينا كل يوم، فالإنسان يفقد قيمته إذا ما فرط فيها. لطالما دعونا الدول لتناول مشكلة التغيرات المناخية بجدية ومحاولة إيجاد حلول دولية للتأقلم مع آثارها، قادرة على حماية المجتمعات الهشة من الكوارث المناخية، ونخص بالذكر الكوارث الحالية والتي ستحدث وحدثت في دول الجنوب. شكرا.
تفضلي.
شكرا جزيلا، يعطيكم العافية. أنا فقدت أني أحضر معكم، كنا في مكان آخر وتأخر النقاش، ولكن أنا فقط أريد أن أقول بداية اسمي هلا مراد، وأنا من الأردن وأترأس جمعية اسمها دبين للتنمية البيئية، وأعمل تحت مظلة المجموعة العاملة من أجل الحقوق البيئية وتغير المناخ. اليوم تطور غريب حصل أيضا ضمن المناقشات التي أدت إلى شطب كل ما يرتبط بالاعتراف بالحق في بيئة صحية وسليمة من القرار السياسي والملف النهائي لإعلان أو لمسودة شرم الشيخ الخارجة من المفاوضات. لذلك نحن نقوم الآن بحملة نتمنى من الجميع دعمها في إطار التوقيع عليها لجعل الدول جميعا لا تمانع من إيجاد خطاب ولغة واضحة حقوقية داخل الكونتست أو داخل السياق العام لكوب 27، لأن إزالة هذا الموضوع يعني نكوص حقيقي عن قرار الأمم المتحدة الصادر في شهر أكتوبر لعام 2021. القاضي ضمن أكثر من 161 دولة أقرت هذا الحق كحق من حقوق الإنسان.
عفوا أنا
شكرا جزيلا.
شكرا لك، مضطرة أتشك إذا ما في سؤال واضح، لأنه بعد عندنا
السؤال واضح. أنا فقط بدعو الجميع من هذا المنبر ليكون ضمن أجندة حقوق الإنسان بشكل واضح تحت مظلة جرين بيس. شكرا جزيلا
لك. إذا بعد في أسئلة بنقدر ناخذها ونجاوب عليها بعدين، لأنه خلص الوقت هلا. شكرا جزيلا لكم على الحضور. ميرسي.
The European Committee of the Regions, part of the European Union delegation to COP27, members of the LGMA, local governments and municipal authorities constituency to the United Nations. The COR has been present, the European Committee of the Region has been present here at COP27 with a delegation of mayors and regional presidents, under the leadership of the President of the European Committee of the Regions, Vasco Alves Cordeiro, and the Mayor of Warsaw, Rafał Trzaskowski. We are here this afternoon with two of our members, Alison Gilliland, Dublin City Councillor, Rapporteur of the European Committee of the Regions opinion on a formal inclusion for cities and regions in the UNFCCC process, and Vincent Chauvet, Mayor of Autun, member of the European Committee of the Regions Green Deal Going Local Working Group, European Climate Pact Ambassador, and Rapporteur on Stepping Up Europe's Ambition, Climate Ambition, and Local Green Budgets. I will give the floor to each of our speakers, and then we will open the floor for questions from the audience here and online. Ms. Gilliland, the floor is yours.
Thank you, David, and good afternoon, everybody. As David said, we are here representing the European Committee of the Regions, and our issue is very much focused on subnational government, multi-level cooperation, and the recognition of local and regional authorities. We are the authorities on the ground implementing climate mitigation and climate adaptation measures, and also cleaning up after severe weather incidents, flooding, wildfires, etc. I am conscious that we only have a draft and that the negotiations are still going on. My comments will be with regard to that draft, but firstly I just want to thank the tireless patience of the negotiations and the negotiators. We all know it's not easy. We're all fighting for our own corner, so their job is very complicated. But I do think from our own parts, the European Union and the European Commission have shown great leadership. We had the announcement earlier on this week with regard to rising our ambitions from 55 to 57, and that is very, very welcome. So our ultimate aim was that we would have included in the final text details regarding the formal inclusion of multi-level governments in the COP process, in the UNFCCC structures. And we have a special envoy here, Ms. Sharon Dijksma, who is the Mayor of Utrecht, representative of ICLEI, and she's very much fighting our corner on that. We also proposed a recognition of local and regionally determined contributions to complement nationally determined contributions. And we very much believe that they are of a huge benefit when it comes to getting down to the granular of implementation, to identify what is happening where, and as a contribution to the global stocktake. We also propose that local and regional authorities can access direct financing as opposed to through their national governments. Again, this will allow local governments to propose their measures, their projects, with an element of evaluation as to carbon reduction outcome. Again, we see that as a value within the process. At the moment, reading the draft text, there is no reference to the important role of multi-level engagement in the preamble, but we do recognise that Article 83 at present includes a recognition of the important role of local communities and cities in responding to climate change. And that is very much like the Glasgow Pact. The additional line there is to highlight the urgent need for multi-level and cooperative action. It is a statement, however, we are not seen as a standalone. We're still included as a non-party actor. So we're in there with indigenous groups, which we obviously support, youth and gender. But I suppose what we would like to see in the final text is a section dedicated to local and regional governments. We also raised, in our opinion, that David referenced, particularly gender and youth, and we do very much welcome the meaningful and equal participation of women in climate action to ensure a gender-responsive implementation. We are aware that women bear the brunt of climate change. They're the ones that are the most vulnerable when it comes to gender, and they absolutely have to be equal in the process and in the decision making. And I would hope that the negotiators themselves would take this on board and perhaps be a little bit more sensitive to gender parity and gender equality in their numbers. We also recognise the significant articles dedicated to youth, to listening to the voices of young people and to children, and also for highlighting the role of girls within those children. So there are my comments. Final one, I very much welcome the first ever ministerial on urbanisation and climate and the launch of the Surge initiative. And I really do hope that we see this ministerial repeated in further COPs. I'll hand over now to my colleague, Mervisant Chouvet.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Alison. I fully share the comments of my colleague, former Mayor of Dublin, and on behalf of the Liberal political group in the European Committee of the Regions, I would like also to say that when you look at it, for the moment, local governments are only described but what they are not. They're non-party stakeholders. They're non-state actors. They fall into non-market approaches. It's high time we have a positive definition of the role of local governments within the UNFCCC process. Why? Because here the COP is called Together for Implementation, but who is going to implement? According to OECD numbers, about 2/3 of the money that is going to be spent, we spend a lot about the money at an international level, but at the local level, at the local scale, 2/3 of the money will be spent by local and regional governments. And we don't want only to be implementing, we don't want only to be subcontractors of national or international policies. We want also, if we're going to implement, we want also to be part of the design. And this is what we advocate with a constant position of the European Committee of the Regions, which represents all mayors and all local elected politicians in Europe. But this is also why many mayors, many elected politicians, COP after COP, come to these negotiations to make their voice heard. And yes, there was a first historic moment yesterday with the Surge, which stands for Sustainable Urban Resilience for the Next Generation. Ministers of all the parties regarding urbanization and mayors from all over the world, of course the Committee of the Regions and also American mayors and mayors from the Global South. And we wish that this Surge initiative that is hosted by UN Habitat keeps on going, and that next year we're going also to have this meeting to be held with more and more participants to make our voice heard. You had the demonstration, if you look for pictures of mayors holding signs. It's very rare that mayors themselves do demonstrations, but this time we wanted to have our voice heard at the global level and also at the European level, and we welcome very much also the ambition and the fact that the European Union as a whole, being a European Union institution, is very ambitious and is leading forward in the fight against climate change. And we very much welcome as well the proposal by Frans Timmermans to unlock the negotiation, because to close it, we thought and we still think that there's a lack of ambition at the international level. And if you want to find ambition in the world now, you have to look for the mayors, because in most of the countries, the most ambitious public entities, the people who are doing work on the ground, who are really reducing CO2 emission, who are really transitioning to net neutrality, it's not the nation states, it's regions and cities. And this is why we ask for a more formal representation in the UNFCCC process. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alison. Thank you very much, Vincent. We will now open the floor. We have a first question here. Madame, s'il vous plaît. If you could please say your name and the media.
Yes. My name is Odile Harvey. I work for Radio Nord-Bretagne. Can you hear me?
Oui.
Yes. I'd like to ask a question to Lady. I don't know whether you touched upon for the young people, there are more and more young people that are developing eco-anxiety. And have you touched upon that question? And you know, how you probably some positive news to bring to them. Thank you.
Thank you. Alison, please.
Thank you very much for your question. Yes, we very much recognise that young people can get very overwhelmed and very anxious about the impending, potentially disastrous future. And I think that's why it's so important to involve them in the decision making, that we communicate with them and that their voices and their questions can be asked. And I think if you look at the text 87 to 92 goes into detail there with regarding youth as agents of change. And I think if we can bring and just talk with children as young as 4, 5, 6 and allow them to express their concerns, but also allow us to express our actions that we are doing in their future favour, in their language or in their ways of expressing, I think that can mitigate that anxiety.
Thank you, Alison. Vincent, if you want to comment.
If I may add, I fully share my colleague's comment. And we have a concrete proposal that we adopted at the European Committee of the Regions regarding eco-anxiety, but also action, because eco-anxiety from the youth should not prevent people from acting. It's very important. Is that at every city, above a certain threshold, like 10,000 inhabitants, for instance, there is to have a youth council that is mandatorily consulted on climate actions. Because we know that this is, we used to think it was the challenge of the next generation. But now we know it's the challenge of our generation. And of course, the coming generation, the youth, is very aware of the changes that we'll have to overcome. So not to be constructive and not to have slogans or excessive words and not real action on the ground, we propose that we have this youth council that should be consulted at least on all climate action that is taken at the local level. It's a good way to involve people, and probably also if we act together to remove eco-anxiety.
Thank you. We have a question, Mateusz.
Thank you. Mateusz Kicka from Polish Press Agency. I've got a question to both of you. I spoke with the mayor of Warsaw, Rafał Trzaskowski, and he said that the EU, but also the Polish government, are shifting more and more responsibility to cities in Poland. That's why cities want the EU to transfer money directly to the cities. Is that also your point of view? And do you think that this solution is possible in this new EU, new long budget of EU? Thank you.
Thank you, Mateusz. So a question on direct financing to cities. I think both of you would like to comment. Alison?
Yeah, we do ask, in our opinion, for access to direct funding. I think the EU have actually started a mechanism for that through the EU missions. So it's initiative, there's 5 different missions, one on climate neutral and smart cities, adaptation, ocean and waterways, healthy soil and cancer. Basically what a mission is bringing together cities. They apply to the process. They will be supported with expert guidance in drawing up policy and strategic implementation policy, and then there will be access to finance for them to implement those targets. My own city, Dublin, is one of the EU's smart climate and neutral cities, and the aim there is that we are climate neutral by 2030. There's 100 of those cities across the EU, across the 27 countries, and there's an additional 12 from outside it. So I think from the perspective of supporting where we stand and our call for direct financing, the mission cities actually show that this is a way of making real change happen on the ground. And just for clarity, when we talk about finance, it's not just money for projects. It's money to increase our personnel, to increase our expertise, to upskill those working in local authorities, as well as, for example, infrastructure for mobility projects, for greening projects. It's the all-encompassing mitigation, adaptation, biodiversity, and if we're talking about some places, loss and damage in the middle. And the mission cities, I think, is perhaps our way of piloting that, so we have a stronger argument.
First, let me have a thought and a warm thought to our colleague Rafał Trzaskowski and all the Polish people, and Rafał especially, mayor of Warsaw, who had to come back early to his city regarding the international situation with the war at the border. And he's leading the way, of course, with the Global Covenant of Mayors. Is really an example to us. He's president of our commission. It's very good to have example like him as mayor of Warsaw, an important capital city, to lead the way and represent his political family as well. We also, in the past two years, I was a rapporteur on this opinion, passed the green budgeting at the local level, which is really new now. There is green budgeting at the national level, and here also the OECD is pushing forward with the Committee of the Regions to have green budgeting at the local level. Sometimes it's also green and social budgeting. It allows to measure the impact of the funds that are invested, but it's also a good way for people who are going to be financing this thing to track and to have transparency about how the fund is used. And of course, I think it's a prerequisite to have direct funding from the EU for cities, is to also have this kind of public accountability on it. And it's a global issue, because if we want direct financing, we want it also at the global level, because as we say, ambitions sometimes and many times at the local level, and we don't want cities who want to go forward to be finally a bit pressed or pushed by nation states who are not as advanced as they are. So there needs to be also this global reflection that we work with the OECD about green budgeting, to build also trust between the financiers and the finances.
Thank you very much. We have a question over there.
Thank you. From Spanish news agency EFE, I would like to know, I would like to ask you about two things. First of all, when we spoke on Monday with Rafał Trzaskowski, he told us that in the Committee of Regions, you were disappointed by the current state of the negotiations that day, at the beginning of this week. Now, on Friday, I would like to ask you, how are you? Which is your feeling regarding the evolution of these negotiations in COP27? And secondly, you've talked about one of your main claims here in COPs is to achieve a formal recognition, to be a part in the negotiations. But I guess that to achieve that, you may need some allies inside the states which are currently apart. I would like to ask you are there some states that have shown their will in order to include cities and regions as a part in future COPs? That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bruno. Alison, if you wish.
Thank you, Bruno. I'm still feeling disappointed. We basically have the same as what was in the Glasgow Pact. It's not in the preamble, it's in the text. And as I said at the outset, I think our ultimate aim is to have within the text a section on subnational governments, because we are the implementers of climate adaptation and climate measures. With regard to allies, We worked very closely with the European Parliament on our opinion, and we got full support for it. We also worked with them on their resolution, and they included our suggestions in that, and that went all the way to the European Commission. So we have an allyship across the European institutions. Of course, at our own national levels, we would communicate with national governors and our ministers for climate and energy that are here. The broad family of local governments, the LGMA, the local governments and municipality authorities, which is a constituency of the UN, and through agencies such as ICLEI, the Global South, their various organisations, we are all on the same page on this, and we all work together to lobby our respective constituencies within our geographical area. So from the perspective globally of local governments, and I know the Covenant of Mayors are also there as well, we're standing strong on this. But it is very frustrating that, and if you note, I think it's Article 83, it highlights again the, I'm trying to get it here, the pivotal role. So it acknowledges the engagement of non-party stakeholders in climate action, which complements and broadens it, while recognising the pivotal role of governments in action. So it is very much stating, and I think the Commissioners say, COP is about the national actors, it's about national governments, it's not about, I'm not saying it's not about multi-level, but I do think, given the role that we play implementing on the ground, we should have our own section there. As I said, I really welcome the gender piece, the youth piece. We are the people that know gender, youth, older persons, disabled persons, our Indigenous communities, those that are most vulnerable. We know them best. We literally know where they live. We know their communities intimately. We are the connection to them realizing that gender piece and that youth piece. And I think that's the frustrating piece for us, that we're not recognized as implementers. And it's almost the national policy is made and it's handed, go and deal with it, but they almost turn their backs on us. So, as I said, perhaps we'll get something stronger. We have great trust in our special envoy there. She has even suggested that we would have an advisory role, some sort of vehicle where we could report into the process and have our voice heard formally. So there's a few days perhaps to go, but we will keep pushing for this, and we will be back COP after COP until we achieve it. Thank you.
Thank you, Alison. Now I give the floor to Vincent. So the question, if I may, because it was so about the feeling about the negotiations first.
Yeah. So two questions. The allies that we have in our pledge or in our advocacy. At the global level, I've seen that Rwanda is quite active. Also, very historical moments, should have mentioned as well, is Morocco, where all 12 regions of Morocco signed the pledge of Under 2 coalition. So it's the first time that at the level of a whole country, all subnational governments together pledge for climate action and climate ambition. So I think it's the way forward, and we levy on these African examples also to bring it home. Of course, we have in the European Union very different systems and very different powers at the local level, but I do appreciate it and remark the role of our fellow colleague, Mr. Moreno, the governor of Andalusia, who was here also at the beginning of this week, and is a strong advocate, and of course he has a voice also being president of such a big region. And regarding the consideration on the negotiations, it's true that at the beginning we were disappointed Also because, like everyone else, including us, including journalists, I think, nobody understood the position of the Commission against the fund and the facility. Because I think it was not explained the way it should have been. It was not some selfish reasoning of the Commission saying we don't want to fund because we don't want to fund. It was more of a pragmatic and yet technocratic, this is sometimes the problem with the Brussels view, saying that what is more efficient is to have separate facilities and country-to-country collaboration, but also city-to-city collaboration, and use what is existing and put money in the instruments that are already there. And that's why they were at the beginning against the fund. It was because they thought, as we say in French, it's a fausse bonne idée. It's a fake good idea. It looks like a good idea, but it's not one, because one fund would be very difficult to manage, would be very difficult to use, to spend the money, and that we should more focus on what is existing. So this narrative didn't go through at all, neither for the journalists, not for us. But now what Timmermans announced, he reversed this, and now he's saying that if some countries want a fund, then the EU is not going to oppose the creation of a single fund. And as the President said before, what is a facility between a big fund and there is a whole area of different definition for a facility that you can have. But now the European Union is saying, okay, we can move on this. It was a red line when we arrived. Now so it's something that we open with strong conditions, and one of the conditions being that for some countries in the global south who have become bigger polluter is to make a bigger effort. So right now I would not say we are satisfied, but I would say I'm proud of the way the European Union once again is showing the way by being the most ambitious bloc on the planet for climate action, and also the most serious one, because when we have an agreement at the European level, then at the national level it becomes EU law, and then at the national it's implemented. The Committee of Regions is consulted, then it goes to a local level, and we mean business when we reach an agreement, and that we have a capacity to implement, thanks to local governments, fast on the ground. So not satisfied yet, but proud definitely.
On specific outcomes that we would like to see. That said, we do speak on behalf of transparency and access in the process. And we advocate for decisions to be based in sound research. We also, we appreciate your support, both in the UN and the Secretariat's support, for all of us to have the right to speak and to share our voices, and for there to feel safe, and for our colleagues to feel safe in their advocacy, and for all of us to feel safe in the research that they're conducting in this space. So thank you again for the opportunity to be here.
Thanks so much, and thanks to be very quick. Women and gender.
Thank you so much, Secretary General, for bringing all these constituencies here in this moment of exchange. My name is Gina Cortez Valderrama, and together with my friend Sukiswa White, we are representatives of the Women and Gender constituency. Many concerns have been said, and I will not repeat on the fact, for example, on loss and damage, among others, but I would like to make or to stress the fact that in this moment, a reference, for example, to the clean, healthy and sustainable environment has been deleted from the latest cover decision draft. And that says a lot of this process. That says a lot of how during these days we have experienced how the purpose of this process is just fading away. How instead of creating a space for guaranteeing human rights in the context of climate change, this is turning into an expo fair. And this is something that cannot be acceptable. particularly for the case of gender. Gender has been a topic that has been sidelined already for decades, but in this COP particularly, we have seen how this is just turning another buzzy word that it can be used on a thematic days to bring up a speaker, but not really something to shift a paradigm towards a transformative pathway. It seems so now that we are, for example, living maybe this conversation without a gender action plan. We're still looking for that. So to be very truly honest with you, we don't know who does this agenda item serves to, or what is we have been advocating for years for gender equality in the Paris Agreement, but it's not happening at all. And together with that, I will bring 2 points, and the first one is on racism and on safety. Our African, Afro-descendant feminists have been living racism across the UN process, outside the facilities of the COP as well, to participate here. I will not get into logistics and so on, but I really bring and stress the problem of racism as a limitation to participate in this space, particularly for women. And this together with what has been already mentioned in terms of safety. Safety for the ones that are here, safety for the ones that are leaving, but also thinking on how those issues of harassment cannot be accepted in this space, because the only thing that is doing is building fear and risking trustworthy relationships in this process. And if we cannot trust the process, if we cannot trust what we are doing here, there is no going to be like a change or a moving towards climate change. So I would really try to make a call that to have the leadership to make sure that this space is safe, because it is unacceptable that polluters have more say and decision-making power than those that are in the frontline communities. And to be honest, like with the time, I can really say that we're not going to, there is no ambition that's worth it if we do not change the paradigm that we are going through. Because otherwise, if we continue to the pace that we are doing right now, we are just going to be running as rats in a wheel motorized by the polluters, and this needs to stop. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Women in Gender. Let's go to the last one.
Last but not least, Miigwech, for this opportunity. Anin Bojo, Graham Reid, as part of the International Indigenous Peoples Forum on Climate Change. Want to express our appreciation for providing this space, Secretary General, and I think it's very important that Indigenous peoples close this conversation. And I think there are a lot of important reflections that my colleagues shared around the room. One big absence of that is the specific, distinct status and rights that should be afforded to Indigenous peoples. The role of Indigenous peoples within this process, the distinct status contained within the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, and how that differentiates our voice to other members of civil society. And it's important to consider that within this space because of the constituency process and the way in which our governments and representative institutions participate. I want to also just say part of that is also the important acknowledgement of the complexity of colonization on how Indigenous peoples are represented. And we know that colonization has happened both in the global north and in the global south, and we know that manifests in an inability for Indigenous peoples to participate in many different agenda items, and where a constituency that's representative of 7 UN sociocultural regions. We know that, for instance, our colleagues raised the issue of loss and damage. We know loss and damage in the context of Arctic and Pacific is not well considered within this space. And so we've developed explicit asks within the loss and damage conversation, asks within the cover text. We don't want to see regression from the Glasgow Climate Pact and the important rights-based standards contained within that, the importance of upholding standards, human rights and the rights of Indigenous peoples standards within Article 6, as well as through the participation of grievance mechanisms. We've heard multiple examples around the room of the concern of climate solutions reproducing the system of colonization that has marginalized and structurally oppressed indigenous peoples around the world. And I think it's important in the point about this concept of real solutions, and how are we thinking about real solutions based on our systems of knowledge, our rights, and our governance mechanisms as they manifest in the way in which we participate. We also, and I want to acknowledge Hindu and the work that we did to release the direct access principles for climate financing. Last Saturday, we released those principles in an event with representatives, I think over 170 representatives, really as an acknowledgement of that indigenous peoples need to speak for themselves, and we need to avoid intermediaries speaking on behalf of us and grouping us into other groups that aren't representative of the distinct status and rights that we carry. And we know that one very clear differentiation is the status of indigenous peoples and those of local communities, and the unfortunate reality and how that occurs within the UNFCCC, but also within the CBD and other related UN entities. I'll just close by saying, and I think it's clear within this space that climate change is a matter of life and death, and we need to acknowledge that reality in how we show up and how we create space for indigenous peoples, but also the intersectional identities that indigenous peoples carry, whether they're women, whether they're youth, whether they're knowledge keepers, whether they're gender diverse or two-spirit relatives, whether they're living with disabilities. And this space is a place where we need to improve that. And I'll just close by, over the last several years, indigenous peoples have had the opportunity to dialogue directly with the COP president. And I think it would be useful to explore the possibility of having a similar dialogue with yourself, where we have representatives of all 7 UN sociocultural regions at the table, and you can hear directly from those representatives and the specific priorities that they want to express with you. So Chimigwich for that opportunity and for my colleagues, and look forward to working with all of you in that regard.
Thank you very much, Brother Grams. So, challenge for the response.
Thank you very much. First of all, in relation to transparency, we did a contribution this COP, which was the conclusions of the high-level panel in relation to the verification of the net zero commitments of the non-state actors, and I think it's a very harsh thing for the fossil fuel industry and for the finance industry, so they are not happy, but it's very important to move forward now with the recommendations. I mean, gender and the rights of women in particular is a dramatic situation today in the world, because since the COVID we are backtracking in a number of areas. And obviously the recognition of the fact that climate change impacts are particularly harsh on women are extremely relevant, and this has lost some traction. It was very funny, we had a meeting with the presidency, there were 4 men and I was 1 man with 3 women on my left. So we have full parity now in the 193 senior managers of the UN. We have full parity in our resident coordinators. It's a matter of power. The questions of gender are questions of power in a male-dominated world with a male-dominated culture. And of course, whenever they can, they move things back. And of course, forms of harassment and others are forms of exercise that power in a negative way to intimidate and not to allow women to play that role. And we will always be your allies on that. In relation to indigenous communities, we have in the UN a system of representation of indigenous communities. We have an annual conference with thousands of participants, which are supposed to discuss all issues. Not at the level of every single convention this is respected, because these were made by member states in different circumstances, in different conditions. I am particularly interested in the climate and biodiversity areas to have the voice of indigenous communities, because they manage better the areas where they are in charge. than the other communities. So you have a lot to teach, and your voice is extremely important, and we will be insisting as much as we can. I have no problem. Tomorrow I'm leaving, so this will not be today, this COP, but I have no problem in a next COP to be able to meet. I mean, I'm delighted to do so.
Thank you very much, SG, to respond to everyone in each of our constituency. That what we want also as dialogue, frank, open with you, and we are also here to support what you are doing. Of course, you are talking very briefly than many of the civil society organizations, and we are here also to be your security, not only your security guard, because we can take your word and take it up and up again, and we are happy that you can have a dialogue with indigenous peoples next year and also with all the teams who are there. Thank you so much for your time, but thanks to your team and thanks to Magumi and all the UNFCCC teams who are making our voices up and up there. Last request, may I call all the colleagues to go in the back there, and we want to have a photo with you, and then people know that your security guard are there.
Tons of fuel, wood fuel, are harvested unsustainably in degraded land in areas where nature is already struggling to survive. Just to give an idea, what are 50 million tons is about 1.2 million of trucks full of firewood per year. That equals to about 15,000 kilometers of trucks in line full of firewood, unsustainable firewood burned per year. Hence, our mission is to provide millions of families with affordable technical and software solutions to finance and utilize clean cooking worldwide. We plan to reach the families in a way that we call the 5-step solution. Very simple steps. One is order the EPIC kit, download, sign up the app in the areas where communications are not super fast, let's say in the countryside. We have other technologies to do that. And we receive and install the kit. It's very plug-and-play solution, so very simple to be utilized. And just switch it on and help yourself. So basically, you just use it when you need it, and the family will pay just for an energy utilized, so they don't have to bear the capex, the entry cost of the solution. We are planning to deploy 2 types of solutions, one for the urban area and one for rural area. Urban area where generally electrical grid is available and it's more stable, and where in a rural area where the electrical grid is generally less reliable or not available. So the kit is composed of an induction electrical stove. For the urban settings, will be coupled with IoT Internet of Things solution that will allow us to communicate with the stove and with the customers and with the families, actually, and it will serve as a hub of communication, not only for billing purpose, but also for support and customer service, and also for high quality data. The high quality data will open to us a new world of the high quality carbon credit market, where we could finally redistribute to the families that they are really using, and they are saving our world because they are utilizing the new solution that is 100% clean energy. So we will basically cash back families part of the carbon credits coming from the carbon credit market. For the rural areas where the electrical grid is available but not stable, we will deliver also a battery pack, energy storage, and where it's not available, we will add to it solar panels. With the EpiKit solution, we will aim what is called the triple bottom line solution, a solution that takes care of financial, social, and environmental challenge. We will have 100% green energy for cooking. This will be right new experience for families, because for the first time they will have zero cooking, zero smoke cooking solutions, and will have to be safe and clean experience for households. Solar and wind technology will provide the necessary energy to power the EPIC kit, and the grid feed-in tariff could decrease and will decrease families' cooking costs. In the countries where a wheeling scheme is allowed, this could be a valuable opportunities for green energy to be partnered with the clean cooking solution and the carbon credit market. Before we leave, I would like to present you the team. As I mentioned before, my name is Fabio. I'm the founder of EPIC Stove Solution. I have more than 15 years work experience in the energy sector. I'm an engineer by training and I hold a PhD in electrical engineering. Filippo is our strategy advisor. He has more than 10 years experience in the e-commerce industry as a serial entrepreneurial. Kenneth, we just met him, is our local development person reference. And Alessandro is our senior sales advisor. He's kind of the Ronaldo of the field. He nowadays has more than projects in more than 7 countries in Africa, deploying more than 200 people and deploying 80,000 stoves per year for the benefits of the 500,000 vulnerable people. And we just add to our team, our local partner from Ghana, and Emergency of Igbo from Nigeria, Climate Change Network, Nigeria. So I thank you very much for your attention. If you have any questions or willing to deploy any of these solutions in your communities and your country, please drop us a line and we'll be more than happy to assist you. Thank you very much and have a nice day. Thanks. Yep, we have our colleague from Nigeria. They would like to make a statement on clean cooking. Thank you.
All right, thank you for giving me the floor to speak. My name is Emaya Keyibio. I'm from Nigeria. Talking about clean cooking energy, Nigeria uses firewood in cooking and charcoal, and that has caused a great effect on women, especially pregnant women. So what Climate Change Network Nigeria did, we did a collaboration with Alliance for Clean Cook Stove, in partnership with Ministry of Environment, Nigeria. We came up with a policy that every Nigeria
on implementation of the national adaptation plans, particularly for LDCs, through the expedited process under the Green Climate Fund. The second point under means of implementation would be we would like to have a very clear process forward in defining climate finance to ensure clear aggregated accounting and reporting of climate finance. We know that during this COP we have had lengthy discussions, we have had reports that have been placed. Now whether 80 billion has actually been paid or whether 100 billion will be scaled up next year really depends on how we are able to address the issue of climate finance. So this is of paramount importance. Also under means of implementation, we would call for recognition of the importance of increasing financial and technical support to developing countries for the implementation of the enhanced transparency framework in a timely, adequate, and predictable manner. The other area that we want to make general observations on is that of the global stocktake. The global stocktake related paragraphs must be under the ambition section because it is the mechanism to drive and raise ambition under the Paris Agreement. Also, we must acknowledge the global stocktake next year to focus on output, and this will require political level engagement to keep up with the momentum for both ambition and implementation. Before I close, on behalf of the LDCs, let me emphasize that the LDCs with a high vulnerability and very low resilience, the capacity to adapt, are at the front lines of climate catastrophes, even at the present level of warming of 1.1 degrees Celsius. Our limits to adaptation have already been tested, and in some cases, it's beyond our ability to respond, which makes every tenth of a degree of warming very critical for us. It is indeed an existential crisis. We are asked to make a compromise on this at the substantive conclusions that we are adopting for the second periodic review. In the spirit of compromise, we moved back substantially from our initial position. However, we would not accept further dilution of the language regarding the climate goal and the temperature goal of 1.5 degrees Celsius. In many paragraphs here in the cover decision, as well as periodic review, the reference to 1.5 degrees Celsius and message from the IPCC is interpreted and presented in a different manner. We call for consistency in the language while referring to 1.5 degrees Celsius. The need for the greenhouse gas emissions to peak almost immediately and before 2025 and achieve net zero by 2030 to keep temperatures to 1.5 degrees by the end of the century is imperative for us. Hence, we would want to keep these paragraphs as they are. Thank you very much.
I thank Bangladesh very much for those remarks. Next I have Bolivia, followed by Brazil. Bolivia.
Thank you very much, President. Well, I want to associate myself with the statement made by Pakistan on behalf of the G77 and China. And, well, I want to speak on behalf of the LMDC. We appreciate very much, Mr. President, the effort to provide this more clear understanding of the paragraphs to be included in the cover decision. And, well, I'm going to go to just highlight the issues that we don't want to see in this cover decision, since, well, I explained before the rationale behind this, so I will be very direct to the point. In para 7, regarding the science, we think that we should delete the last part of this paragraph, since this has been already addressed in the para 6 above. Regarding para 12, we think that we don't need to have any reference to the G20, so we suggest to delete the paragraph 12. On mitigation, we think that picking and choosing specific scenarios of the IPCC is not the way forward, so we do prefer deleting the second part of this paragraph 17 regarding choosing just one particular element of the IPCC report. Regarding paragraph 22 and 23, we think we should merge those paragraphs and also to delete the references specifically to one of the scenarios of the IPCC, while we are ignoring the rest, the other scenarios. And also we think that there is no appropriate to well, urging all parties to develop the long-term strategies, well, since this is only compulsory for developed countries and voluntary for developing countries. So the paragraph should be just well, we should just say including reducing global carbon dioxide emissions in line with the best available science in the context of equity and common but differentiated responsibilities. We concur fully with that the section of adaptation needs to be strengthened. Well, and not to use very technical language, because this is a more political message of the COP. So paragraph 31, well, it's very technical using the IPCC language, but it's not really addressing the key message. And in the GGA, there is too much emphasis on early warning systems. So we have 3 paragraphs regarding the same issue. So we think that this should be addressed more in a more straightforward approach. And the early warning systems should be moved to the previous section, since, well, it is not the focus of the GGA. Regarding loss and damage, we do really expect that the strong language should come from the establishment of the fund for funding loss and damage. Otherwise, well, we are still in a very a very weak language regarding loss and damage. Regarding the just transitions, we prefer not to have a prescriptive approach in para 43. We should only say in the context of the temperature goal of the Paris Agreement. In para 44, and to give a direction to the just transition, we think that after stakeholders, we should add while addressing structural inequalities. We support the establishment of the work program on the just transition in para 46. Regarding finance, finance is more focused on mitigation than in adaptation. And, well, we do not like the approach of linking finance with investment opportunities because, well, this is really biased to mitigation and developed countries. So we suggest to delete all the references regarding to investments in para 48 and not to address sectoral targets also in para 48 regarding energy. And when referring to the 4 and 6 trillion a year, we prefer to delete the last part of this paragraph because this is really addressing that the provision of finance should be attached to the efforts of the private sector, central banks, commercial banks. So we prefer to delete the second part of this paragraph. Regarding para 51, we think that just signaling out to a specific region is not the most appropriate way to address these issues, so we prefer to have a larger reference to all developing countries. In para 52 also, we think that the reference to investments should be deleted. We think that para 54 regarding the provision of finance needs really a more strong language. In para 55, we suggest to delete also the calling to the multilateral development banks and IFIs to scale finance, and also we think that there is a lot of repetitions in this context in para 56, 58, 59, referring to the same thing, and we prefer not having such 4 paragraphs calling to the multilateral development banks. And because, well, this is really outside the scope of the convention, so we suggest to delete these 4 paragraphs. Regarding paragraph 65, we think that it is better not to have any reference at all to the 2.1c. Well, because this is really a discussion should be addressed in the context of the article.
Olivia, just for the benefit, you asked for which 4 paragraphs in the finance section? I didn't catch that.
64. No, 65, the 2.1c, sorry.
You said 4 paragraphs?
Sorry, President. So I suggested to delete 56, 58, 59, and just to address this issue in a more straightforward way in para 55. Regarding